Hey everybody, it's great to see you. Thanks for taking time out of your schedule to be with us. This weekend is massive, not only here at Cokesbury Church, but it's massive all around the world as Christians are in this new era trying to figure out how do we celebrate the greatest news the world's ever heard. And I honestly believe that it is, that there's something special about Easter that sets it apart from every other day. It's the day that we gather and we celebrate the good news that the tomb has been left empty. And here's what I know for sure, that in this age of social distance, it's never meant to be social isolation. And so as you are engaging in worship with us, I want to encourage you, just jump on the chat, because we don't want to just perform for you or to entertain you. We really do want to connect with you, and that's a great way for you to connect with folks. The other thing I know is that as we go through this process together, that you've got the emotional side of things as we deal with a brand new world. You've got the physical idea of, can I stay healthy? Can I protect my family? Can I keep my kids healthy? But then there's the whole soul aspect. And I've been around long enough to know that how the soul goes, so go the emotions and so go the health. And so what we do every single weekend is we try to connect with people to feed your souls. And I think this weekend, we've got some good words for you. I want to start off by asking you to think about this question. What's great is wherever you're plugging in at, you've got time. And so you can kind of let this soak. If somebody were to ask you, what are you hoping for? What do you think you'd say? Like, what is that big deal that you really are placing all of your hopes in? Maybe it's your work, right? Maybe it's some promotion, or maybe it's a project, or maybe it's a deal that's yet to be made. And because so many of us are working at home, there's like legit marketplace stress right now. And it's a much bigger deal than it normally would be. Maybe it's got something to do with a relationship, right? Like maybe there's a broken relationship, or there's a relationship that we no longer have. Maybe it's a relationship that's been forced into distance, and it's really hard not to be physically around someone. I know that that is a massive stressor for a lot of us. I would bet that for a bunch of us, that hope that we're placing everything on, it revolves around our health or the health of somebody that we love. So here's what I know about every single one of us. We are all hopers. It's ingrained in our DNA, like we were created. When we drew our first breath, there was something deep down inside of our soul that longs to experience this thing called hope. When we were little, we hoped that our parents would be parents who would love us and that we would have friends who would care about us. Then as we got older, we hoped we'd make the team, or we hoped that we would get into a good school and make really great grades. Then we hoped that we could get out of school and still have a low enough debt to manage it. After that, we hope maybe that we get into a house. Right here in our little corner of the world, that's a pretty big hope that a lot of us carry with us. Then maybe we hope that we will get a spouse, right? And in spite of a global pandemic, there are couples who are still getting engaged, couples who are still trying to figure out how do they celebrate one of the most important relationships in their marriage. Once we're married, a lot of people go on to hope to have children. You hope that you can get kids into that house. And then once you get kids into that house, you hope that you can get those kids out of the house, right? Like that can be a huge hope right there. Maybe you hope to get a job. And then you hope one day you'll be able to retire from that job. And once you retire, the question becomes, well, what are you going to hope for then? It's a strange thing about us. We outgrow a lot of stuff in life, but nobody ever outgrows hope. Like, it's impossible for us to get too old. Nobody cannot hope. Some eras tend to be more hope-filled than other eras, and if you're into U.S. history, maybe you've got extra time on your hands, you may be aware of this. But after the United States won the War of 1812, There was such a strong sense of purpose and shared national unity that from about 1812 to 1825, it's actually known among historians as the era of good feelings. I like that. It's just an era of good feelings. What do you think they'll call the area in which you and I are living right now? Would it be an era of political partisanship? Is it the era where we finally acknowledge the gap between the wealthy and the poor? Will it be an era that's just simply marked by economic devastation or cultural or social isolation? I wonder, when we look back on this era that we're living through now, will it just be considered to be just overwhelming pessimism? It seems to me that there's a lot of indications that even though you and I are currently living in the most powerful nation on the planet, we've been brought to our knees, and we're actually facing a shortage of hope. The CDC noted recently that we've gone through 3 straight years where the average life expectancy in our country has actually declined. That hasn't happened in more than a century, believe it or not. And it's not because of heart disease, and it's not because of cancer. Those deaths are actually down. But the causes of death that are currently soaring through the roof are drug abuse, alcohol-related deaths, and suicide. These are commonly known as the diseases of despair. There are 2 economists from Princeton that coined that phrase, and it's caught on quite rightly. In the last 20 years, fatalities to these causes that you might think of as despair deaths have almost tripled. So what that means is that we and our children are literally dying of hopelessness. In Western societies, both rates of marriage and birth rates are declining in spite of technology and education. Sociologists say this happens when there's a lack of hope. People stop betting the farm on relationships. They stop dreaming about growing their family and the possibilities of what tomorrow might bring. Johns Hopkins says that depression and anxiety are both up across every age spectrum, but as you already know, it's especially high among those students 12 to 17 years old. And every single day they face cyberbullying or social media-induced depression. They didn't even have those terms a generation ago. See, there's this strange dynamic. One form of disappointment is you hope for something and you never get it. Another source is when you hope for something, you actually get it, and then you realize that's not giving me everything that I hoped it would give me. Tim Keller is a great theologian. He quoted a New York columnist who had known a lot of people who were famous, but she actually knew them before they became famous, when they were kind of obscure. And she said that a lot of people would come to a place like New York, of course, right? A lot of people do that. And most of them don't make it. But a few of them would actually find success. They would find exactly what they were looking for, but it never actually brought them the lasting sense of peace that they were hoping for. And here's what she wrote. I thought it was fascinating. She writes, one of the funny things was that after they got famous, if anything, they were more unhappy, angry, and mean than they had been before, because that giant thing they were striving for, that fame that was going to make everything okay and was going to provide them with the fulfillment and happiness, it had actually happened, but nothing changed. They were still them. I think that's a great line. They were still them. That's their problem. That's our problem. We have all of these hopes and dreams, and even if they come into fulfillment, we're still us because we're hard to satisfy. And y'all, I think this actually says something quite profound about our identity and about human nature. Soren Kierkegaard put it like this: if there were nothing eternal in man, he could not despair. In other words, if you and I are just a bundle of appetites and instincts, life would not be the kind of problem that it is for a lot of us. But we're not just appetites and instincts. We actually have a deeper longing deep down inside of us. A writer said a long time ago that God has set eternity in the heart of man. Eternity is in you, and you know it right now. That's why capitalism and socialism and workaholism and money and success and pleasure cannot satisfy what gnaws at your soul and my soul. If there were nothing eternal in a person, then they could not despair. But there is. I do, and so do you. So maybe the deeper question is not what is it that you and I are hoping for. Maybe the deeper question is what's going to be my fallback hope? When I don't get the thing I'm really hoping for, and when I realize that I'm never going to get that thing that I've been hoping for, well, then what am I going to put my hope in then? See, hope in is much deeper than hope for. Hope is supposed to be an anchor for the soul. And I think there's a ton of us, if we could be honest with ourselves right now, we are desperate to find that anchor because it feels like life is just tossing us back and forth and information is coming at us at light speed and we don't have time to react and we're being tossed about. And more than anything, we just want some stability. We want hope that anchors our soul and holds us in the storm. See, hope is what keeps you going when you've lost what you were hoping for. The biblical writers rarely wrote while enjoying great circumstances. And they almost never wrote to a group of people who were facing great circumstances either. But they had a lot to say about the human race and how we ought to have something we can put our hope in. And I think some of the most influential words that have ever been written about hope come from Paul's first letter to the church at Corinth. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, he starts by literally summarizing the gospel. It's the good news. And he talks about how it's this good news that you can actually place your hope in. Here's what he says in verse 1. Now, brothers and sisters, I want to remind you of the gospel I preached to you, which you received, and which you have taken your stand. By this gospel you were saved, if you hold firmly to the word I preached to you. Otherwise, you've believed in vain. For what I received, I passed on to you as of first importance, that Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures, and that he was buried. See, Paul is beginning to summarize the good news. He says, you have taken your stand on it. And we're going to come back to that in a few minutes. What I want to do is just give you two kind of big reasons that I honestly believe that you and I can take our stand and we can put our hope in Jesus. And the first one is incredibly obvious. In fact, when I say it, you're going to be sitting there going, did I really just listen to 16 minutes of him setting this up for that? Well, here it is. The good news, it's actually historical. Like, it really happened. There was a man named Jesus, and he lived his life like nobody had ever lived. And he taught like nobody had ever taught. And listen, once people had an experience of Jesus, they could not forget him. They could not resist him, and they could not at times understand him, but they could not get him out of their minds. He never wrote a book, and yet more books have been written about him than anybody who ever lived. He never posed for a painting, and yet his face, at least what we think he might have looked like, is the most recognizable face on the planet. Nobody is even a close second. He died on a cross, a failure and a reject, yet he actually chose to die. He embraced his death even though nobody else understood. Why would anybody want to do that? And when he died in that moment, on that day, his movement was completely and utterly finished until 3 days later when it wasn't. something happened that resurrected that movement. And his followers insisted what resurrected the movement was the fact that resurrection came to Jesus. And that cross, which had been up until that time a symbol of failure and humiliation and execution, instead it became the world's greatest symbol of hope. And today it adorns more graves with the hope of resurrection than any other symbol. It is absolutely unbelievable. Here's how Paul describes it. Paul says that Jesus was raised on the third day according to the scriptures, and that he appeared to Peter and then to the 12. And after that, he appeared to more than 500 of his brothers and sisters at the same time, most of whom were still living, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, which is Jesus' brother, then to all the apostles, and last of all, he appeared also to me, to Paul. Now, historians generally agree that Paul wrote those words within about 20 years of the actual death of Jesus. And he deliberately lists the names there, right? Did you see it? Peter saw Jesus after the resurrection. The disciples were among those who saw him after the resurrection. Those were kind of the insiders, but then he also goes on to say that there were 500 men and women, most of whom were still alive. And so the point that Paul is trying to make is very clear. Paul is writing, look, if you don't believe me about Jesus, then go and talk to any of them because they were there too. In other words, whatever you think about it, the resurrection was not intended by Paul or anybody else to be understood as a metaphor or a symbol. It was never designed to be some poetic illustration of God's love. It is historical. It actually happened. These were real people who witnessed it with their own eyes. So what does that mean? It's simple. The resurrection means that you and I really can put our ultimate hope in God. Paul says Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures, and that he was raised on the third day also according to the scriptures. And this is important. When he says that Jesus was resurrected on the third day, that's a really important part of the story. In the Old Testament, God was understood to be a God of deliverance, like a God who hears and then who expresses care and then who ultimately acts. And very often in stories, he would deliver and save and rescue and heal on the third day. And so the third day is a pregnant day. Trouble comes, trouble lasts, and then on the third day, let me give you a couple of examples. Genesis chapter 42. Joseph's brothers get put into prison, but on the third day they get released. In the book of Esther, she hears that her people are going to be killed by a genocidal maniac, and she fasts and she prays and then receives the favorability by the king on the third day. It was Abraham who was afraid he was going to lose his son, Isaac, but he sees the sacrifice that's ultimately going to save his son on the third day. See, over and over, God is a God of deliverance and God is a God of salvation, and it always happens on the third day. Now, fast forward to Matthew's gospel. In telling about the events of the day, it says this: So the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy, and ran to his disciples. Suddenly, Jesus met them. Greetings, he said. Now, I love how understated Jesus is right there. Just greetings, like, what's up? They came to him, clasped his feet, now notice this word, and worshiped him. They worshiped him. Yesterday, he was a crucified criminal and a failed Messiah. Today, he's Lord of the universe. And they did not know what else to do but fall on their faces and worship. See, his way, the way of servanthood and humility and self-sacrifice and love, it was not thwarted by the cross. In fact, it turned the cross into the most recognizable symbol in all of human history. It's a symbol that reminds all of us that you don't have to live in fear anymore. You don't have to live in defeat anymore. Nations are going to rise and fall. Civilizations are going to come and go. And the shadow of this one man haunts the human race 2,000 years later like no other. See, Jesus, he literally changed everything. And part of the good news is that that power can work in your life right now. In the midst of all of your fear and all of your anxiety. In the midst of a world that feels like it's been turned upside down. The power of the resurrection is for you. There's a second great truth about the resurrection, and that you cannot deny it. And that is the resurrection is deeply personal. Whatever it is that's going on in your life, every single one of us face this wonder of being born and then having our life come to an end. Biblical writers talk about this a lot. This is from the book of Hebrews. The writer says, just as people are destined to die once, and after that to face judgment, so Christ was sacrificed once to take away the sins of many. And he will appear to bring salvation, that's deliverance or healing or forgiveness, to those who are waiting on him. So here's the truth about you. There are a lot of what I call the wow moments in life. Many of them are good and some of them are bad, right? Like a month ago, we all had a really bad wow moment when our world literally got turned upside down. But in spite of that, there are a lot of really great wow moments that have happened in your life and my life. The day you were born, trust me, for your parents, that was a wow moment. The day that you spoke your first word. The day that you figured out how your feet work and you could put one foot in front of the other and take off running across a room, that was a wow moment. Your first day of school, the first time you think you fell in love, the day you got your driver's license, the day that you graduated, the day that you got married, the day that you got your first real paycheck, the day that you were handed the keys to your very first home, the day that people like me got to watch the Chicago Cubs win the World Series. That was an unbelievable day. But listen, the biggest wow of your existence and my existence, it has not come yet. The most amazing moment of your life and my life, it's going to be the moment after we die. And I know we don't talk about that much, but it's a good thing to think about every once in a while, especially on a weekend like Easter. Because here's what I know, that moment is going to come for every single human being. There's an old story, and it's ridiculous, but it's this little kid that comes running out of his bedroom, and he says to his mom, "Mom, is it true that from dust we are made and to dust we will return?" And she says, "Yeah, well, why do you ask?" And he says to her, I was just looking under my bed, and somebody's either been coming or going, right? Because there's dust everywhere. And as silly as that is, I think there's some truth. Because somebody's always either coming or going. This moment will come into your life when your life is going to be over. And then something really amazing is going to happen. Either you will see God, or the Bible says you'll face an eternity without God. Wow. And God doesn't want anybody to face that. So he says, I'm going to give you my grace and my love and my forgiveness for where you've messed up, and it's going to be a free gift. And I'll be a part of your life every moment that you live. And then when your time is over, you can come and be with me forever in all of eternity after you die. See, that one moment after you die, not only are you going to be celebrating the resurrection of Jesus, somebody needs to hear me say this, you're going to celebrate the resurrection of you. Because our bodies may wear out, but our soul is going to live forever. And I don't know of another way to respond to that than just by simply saying, wow. See, that's the power of Easter. And here's why we celebrate. The death and resurrection of Jesus means that sin, your sin, has been forgiven. That death, your death, is taken care of. That you and I can have hope, that we can live our life with a sense of purpose, that we can actually have meaning and destiny. It means that love is going to triumph over hate, and not just that. It means that one day all of creation itself is going to be redeemed. That suffering has been repealed, that every loss is going to be restored, that God himself is going to wipe every tear from every eye, that sickness and sadness will exist no more. There'll be no more cancer. There'll be no COVID-19, and grieving and mourning and weeping will be no more. And friends, this moment will come. It surely will come, and it will come for one reason that actually happened in human history. Here we go. Here's the wow of Easter right here. It's 7 simple words that rang out across all of human history. They're simple words. It's that Jesus is not here. Jesus is alive. See, that's why the tomb being empty on this day speaks depths into the human soul. That's why it gives us life. That's why people are gathered all across this planet in homes and in basements and with their family to celebrate this good news. And I've been thinking about the power of the empty tomb. Every Easter since I was 19 years old, I led an Easter worship service in a church, and it was packed. Way more people come on Easter than any other time of the year. This is the first time since I was 19 years old that I've stood and preached in an empty church. But you know, as I thought about it this week, just as the human soul needs to know there's an empty tomb, our world needs to know that there's an empty church. And I think the fact that churches are empty across this planet on this day above all days, that's what gives the world hope. Because that means we're not gathering together to celebrate good news for us. No, we're scattered across the planet and we're sharing the good news with every single human being. See, an empty church is actually a good thing because that means the gospel has left the building, and that means that there's a possibility for you to make a difference with your life. And so, Cokesbury, I say to you, I love you, and I miss you, and I hope that you have an unbelievable Easter. But Jesus is not here. Jesus is alive. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen.